The Soviets rehabilitated this synagogue in Kiev shortly after the war's conclusion, but only to stand as a museum. Following independence 2 years ago, the Ukraine government returned the building to the Kiev Jewish community, and with help from American Jewish groups, its mission has now been re-established. Rabbi Yaakov Bleich.
The synagogue that we're in now, which is the only operating synagogue presently in the city of Kiev, was built 98 years ago. At that time, in this neighborhood alone, in Podol, there were close to 100 synagogues. During the war, it was used as a stable by the Germans, the Nazis, and of course, the interior was totally destroyed. But after the war, in 1946, it was rebuilt, refurbished, and the paintings, the ark, and basically everything else that you see here what is from that time, the zodiac signs and the paintings on the walls. The Jewish community in Kiev, as far back as 1,000 years ago, there were Jews in Kiev. After the war, you had probably 250,000 Jews in Kiev after the war. Today, there are approximately 100 to 120,000 Jews in Kiev.
From deep within Ukraine, the group traveled back into the heart of pre-war Polish Galicia, with Lvov as its destination. Records indicate that less than 10,000 of the pre-war Jewish population of 150,000 survived the war. The present Jewish community is estimated to number 15,000. It has been witnessing in recent years a steady emigration to Western Europe, Israel, and to America. Some of those remaining are trying to rehabilitate the old synagogues. This one was used by the city until recently as a sports center. New classrooms are being added to this synagogue for the teaching of Hebrew and Jewish traditions to both children and adults. The Central State Historical Archive in Lvov is located in the 400-year-old St. Bernard Cathedral. Mr. Ivan Ivanovich, Vice Director, indicates the range of documents available to researchers.
Стосується історії
і
населення багатьох європейських країн. Теж від 14-го від 14 століття до 1939 року. За кількістю документів наш архів не є найбільшим на Україні, звичайно.
As for the number of records and collections and documents, our archives are not the biggest one in Ukraine.
Але за цінністю
The archival records are found in the former living quarters of the cathedral's monks. Many thousands of books containing records of life and death during the past 400 years are available to researchers. Illuminated by the light of the camera, the group walked down seemingly endless corridors stacked from floor to ceiling with handcrafted, leather-bound volumes. One book is opened to examine its Latin inscriptions. Piled high on one cabinet are dozens of Torah scrolls collected after the war. Their future is uncertain. Bill studies the names from his father's town of origin. Deborah prepares for her visit to the birthplaces of her family. Ben and Jay are verifying notes in anticipation of their trip to Brody.
Well, tomorrow's the big day. All of you are going to visit your ancestral town, to walk in the footsteps of your ancestors, and hopefully bring home some memories, some memorabilia, maybe even meet some relatives, but most of all, satisfy some curiosity that I know many of you have had for years and years.
Driving south from Lvov toward the small city of Tlumach leads into an unexpected but not unusual traffic problem. The City Hall of Tlumach, as it appears on a postcard from 1920, when the majority of its population was Jewish. The building is essentially unchanged, but now the city has no Jews. Dorothy meets with the mayor of Tlumach and finds him sympathetic. She has arrived unannounced, and he has put aside his work to talk with her about his knowledge of the Jewish history of the city and of his plans to construct a monument to honor the more than 4,500 Jews who were murdered by the Nazis in the winter of 1942. The street leading to the edge of town brings Dorothy and the mayor, with their translator, to a granite memorial stone. He tells her that this stone represents a memorial which will be dedicated to the city's victims of fascism. There, where those little trees are growing, is where the memorial will stand. And in Yiddish, Russian, and Ukrainian, their history will be told. For now, this is just a plaque to indicate his determination that the monument will be built. As Dorothy places her stone of remembrance, she recalls that at 13 years of age, she was one of the very few Jews from this area who escaped from a forced labor camp as the Germans were executing its prisoners. For more than a year, until the Soviet army liberated the area, she survived, hiding in the nearby forest. Brody was, in the mid-1800s, a prosperous and essentially Jewish town on the principal road between Russia and Galicia to the west. Ben and Jay met with the mayor to seek his help in locating Ben's family records.
And I came back to see the town where my grandmother was born. What I wanted to ask him is there a historian of the town specifically?
Я хотів би вас
for
запитати,
Jewish
чи
affairs?
тут є якась людина, яка може вважатися істориком цього міста?
Зараз вона її навіть відшукаємо.
Okay. Is there are Jewish records kept here in the town?
Значить, в таких документів єврейських не збереглося,
As a matter of fact, there are no Jewish documents kept here in Brody.
тому що в 44-му році
In 1944,
тут був Бродівський котел,
there
велика,
was a great battle near Brody.
і практично місто було на 80% знищено.
80% of the town was destroyed. No documents survived. Maybe you know that here in Brody, a ghetto was organized during the Nazis. The Germans killed there something like 20,000 Jews. We are doing our best to build up a memorial, a memorable sign, a memorable mark to memorize this tragic event.
The Fortress Synagogue of Brody was constructed in the early 18th century at a time when 65% of the city's population was Jewish. Rebuilt at various times during the following 200 years, it was destroyed by the Germans in 1944. Its latest rebuilding started 5 years ago with money contributed by American Jews, but when the few remaining Jews emigrated or died and the funds were exhausted, the effort stopped. During the war, many thousands of Jews were executed against this wall, their bodies falling into a large pit which remains under this road as their unmarked grave. A postcard view of 75 years ago offers another view of Brody. With archival documents from Warsaw, Kiev, and Lvov, Ben and Jay walked along streets which they had now identified as having been within the area known to his ancestors. It is the last day of the trip. The group is on its way to the small city of Drohobych, 30 miles southwest of Lvov. The small Jewish community of the city had learned of the planned visit and warmly greeted this first group of American Jewish genealogists to visit their community. Using Yiddish, Polish, Russian, gestures, and simply smiles, the two groups greeted each other. During a short walk on the main street, they passed a wall against which the Germans had murdered many residents. A short distance from the city is a seldom visited cemetery. It was the place to which the Germans transported most of the Jews of the area to be killed and buried in large and, until recently, unmarked graves.
So the inscription says, in the style of the communist propaganda, a neutral table to the victims of German fascism during occupation, 1941, 1945, where you can see consequences of our work. Such memorials we have nowadays only two.
From her research of her family roots in Drohobych, there was little doubt to Sidel, as she repeated the traditional Jewish prayer for the dead, that members of her family were among those buried at this spot. A pre-war photograph of the Drohobych synagogue, the largest ever constructed in former Polish Galicia. After 50 years as a factory, it was recently returned to the Jewish community. It was an unforgettable day for these survivors of the Holocaust who are just emerging from over 50 years of isolation from their Jewish heritage. And for the visiting Americans, beyond remembering the dead, they shared in a celebration of life. In the gathering together of memories, the present found the past, and in that moment, this unique heritage of the Jewish people was reaffirmed.